Welcome everyone, Christine here on Serious Gaming with a discussion video about World of Warcraft because Blizzard recently announced that they've lost about 3 million subscribers for the game. Gameplay footage is from a normal run. I recently came back to World of Warcraft, got to max level, and I'm trying to gear up to get into Heroic Mythic raiding, so, you know, I'm doing normal with pugs. Yes, with pugs, that's how raiding is right now. You do a lot of the content with pugs. Some groups will require you have curve, others not so much, so just a point to be taken right there. Anyway, I'm making this discussion video because I feel there's problems with the raiding in World of Warcraft, and that's actually one of the main reasons Blizzard is unable to keep people interested in playing. Some people would argue over lack of activities outside of raiding, PvPing in the end game, you know, outside of the garrison stuff, and they have a point. Obviously, the garrison is not all that entertaining, but then again, that's not the main problem, in my opinion. I don't think the lack of daily quests or the lack of scenarios is the issue with Warlords of Draenor. Because we had those things in Mists of Pandaria, and we saw a steady drop in subscribers in Mists of Pandaria. The problem is the raiding. The problem is, you know, stuff outside the open world. Because the open world is perfectly fine. The leveling experience in Warlords of Draenor is perfectly fine. Outside of the 5-man dungeons all being horrible, it was perfectly fine. Why the fuck would you do 5-man dungeons while leveling? Well, the only reason is for gear. Outside of that, you can give a fuck about them. It's just so much more interesting to do the open world content with the story, the cinematics, the quests, the way they've set it up. Far more interesting to do that than 5-man dungeons. Like, they were boring as hell. But once you reach max level in Warlords of Draenor, the only option you've got in order to get into Mythic raiding, or, well, the only options, is to do raids from LFR to normal to heroic to be able to get into Mythic raiding over and over and over again. You'll be doing, at some points, you might even end up in the situation where you're doing LFR normal heroic on the same week. You know, if you're just unlucky with drops, you know, you just want one item and you have a heroic 5-man item, and it just won't drop for normal and heroic, so you're doing LFR for that particular reason, or you're doing it to get the stones from a certain boss that you're not killing in normal or heroic, like Imperator Margok, you know, something along those lines. That's the reason. You get to max level, you do the max level normal 5-mans, then you do the heroic ones, then you do LFR, or actually you just jump into LFR once you have the item level, once you've got silver proving grounds, and then it just becomes very boring. LFR is boring as fuck. Normal raiding, once you figure things out, doing that over and over again with pugs that basically one-shot everything, that there's no chance in hell you'll fail on the vast majority of the bosses, is boring as fuck. Same with heroic raiding. Raiding is not fun if you're just going in there smashing through everything because you're with people that are playing on their alts. There's plenty of people playing on their alts that will form pug groups. You get in that, it's pretty easy to get in that, you know, for normal raiding. You get in that, you get experience, you look at guides on the internet on how to do these bosses. There's plenty of guides, there's a video guide for every single boss, it's not really that difficult. Or if you really want to improve your skill level, you just go into the Proving Grounds and you get Endless 30. If you are able to get Endless 30 in World of Warcraft, in the Proving Grounds, you get the title, then you're a pretty good player. Because it is very challenging, it's pretty demanding. That's what I would personally recommend if you want to get your skill level up there. Don't do LFR, don't do normal, don't do heroic, because those are not places where your skill will actually improve if you're doing them with pugs. Do Proving Grounds, because that's where your personal skill is tested to the limit, you know, beyond gold. When you're looking at endless waves, that's when your skill level as a healer, DPS, tank is really tested to the limit. That's my personal recommendation. But the fact is that regardless of how you cut it, regardless of how good of a player you are, you know, what your past raiding experience is, the fact that you have to do all these raids on all these difficulties over and over and over again to be able to get in something that's interesting, like, you know, late game heroic bosses, to kill those interesting bosses, the more interesting bosses on heroic difficulty, or to get into mythic difficulty, That's boring as fuck. It takes weeks, months to be able to go through that. All these difficulties, farming them can take months. I did it in Mists of Pandaria. I killed every boss on Flex, then on normal, you know, when normal was the second highest difficulty. But I couldn't get into heroic because I just got unlucky with the gear drops. So I killed Garrosh for about 2 months in pugs on normal, and then I just quit because I was sick and tired of having to farm this fucking instance over and over again with pugs, and it was boring as shit. And that's the problem, it's boring as fuck. And regardless of who you are, you'll have to do this. Either doing it on your own with no guild, or you join a guild and then you join their alt raids to be able to gear up. That might go faster for obvious reasons. They might be okay with you joining their raids once you've proven yourself in their eyes, you know, as a player. Even, you know, on something on normal heroic, you prove yourself and they might be willing to take you to their main raids much quicker if you proved yourself, if they're willing to accept you, if they need someone that's your spec, your class, right? But that's still boring. It's more interesting, obviously, to be in a guild, to have people talk with on TeamSpeak, but it's still pretty boring having to do these raid difficulties over and over and over again. And that's the problem. That's the main issue. Why should I keep playing, keep paying money to Blizzard to be able to do what? Do the same raids over and over again, seeing the same fucking bosses, seeing their same dialogue? You know, when you got to a boss in even Wrath the Lich King, when you got to the Lich King himself, even on normal, it felt amazing. Now it's like, oh, you do LFR, you see the boss, that's it. What's the incentive? Oh, it's like, oh, you haven't seen the boss on its proper difficulty. So, in order to see the boss on the proper difficulty, which is Mythic, to see all his mechanics, to see him in all his glory, because there's no difference between mechanics in normal versus heroic right now. There's no difference, so whatever. But if you want to see a boss in Mythic, you have to spend weeks, potentially months, grinding through these shitty raids on these shitty difficulties, with or without a guild, to be able to get there. And that's boring as fuck. Progressing through heroic, okay, with a guild, yeah, that can be fun when the raid initially comes out. But if you miss that train, and it can be very easy to miss that train, then it's boring as fuck having to do that instance again, over and over again. That's the problem I have with WoW. The reason I came back to WoW was for the social aspect. I wanted to be in a guild, I wanted to speak with people from around the world, from various countries, you know, just have fun with different people from different countries. That's the reason I came back to WoW in Warlords of Draenor. But I'll be damned if it's not boring as hell having to do all these raids and all these raiding difficulties. And I think Blizzard realizes this. I think Blizzard has actually come to realize that the catch-up mechanics that they have in the game in terms of LFR, normal, heroic, all these difficulties, that it's a problem, that it doesn't work as it should. In the past, we had Valor points or badges which we could use to get gear. We still have them, by the way, Apexis crystals, though the gear is pretty terrible and you have to get a huge amount of crystals if you want to get any gear worthwhile. It's just better to do LFR instead of farming for 9,000 Apexis crystals. It's just more worth it. Simple as that. You'll probably get it faster. Unless you spend a lot of garrison resources and you get a lot of missions, it's probably faster to do it like that. But now Blizzard with Mythic 5-mans, they've kind of realized the problem is like, okay, we'll give you very high level gear through Mythic 5-mans if you do them. And they're not really difficult, but you've got a large number of instances, a huge amount of variety. Even if it's old instances, there's more variety between doing the same raid over and over again and doing the, you know, an instance that's several years old, doing that once per week, getting the gear, then, you know, jumping to another instance, doing that, so on and so forth. I'll take doing the 5-man that's 6 years old, 7 years old, or perhaps more, versus doing the same raid over and over again. It's just more interesting, and that's telling of how boring doing raids on normal LFR and even heroic early bosses and heroic, how boring that can be. if you're, you know, if you want to get the gear to be able to get into Mythic rating. That's all I had to say. Costin here on Serious Gaming signing out. Maybe Blizzard will fix this. Maybe, you know, what they're doing with the Mythic 5-mans is a good first step, but only that, a good first step towards resolving this issue, towards keeping players interested. Who knows? Maybe for the second quarter, we'll see an even more substantial drop in subscribers, hugely substantial. Though I don't think the revenue of the game is going to go down because they're milking people for all they're worth.